Well, hello, everybody out there in webinar land. It is Corey Poirier and excited to be online and sharing with everybody today. I'm looking forward to us perhaps having some engagement at the end of the presentation. Perhaps we'll get some Q&A involved. I'll cross my fingers for that. And I know that some people that are watching are not actually on the chat box and going to the chat box. So I know some people won't be able to chat if they don't log in that way, but that's all good as well. So I just wanted to talk today about the secrets of enlightened super achievers and super achievement. At the same time, I have a bit of an update for you. And I also have a bit of a good news out of the update. But the bad news is that Elizabeth Hamilton Guarino is actually feeling under the weather today. So she's not able to join us today. But the good news is that Elizabeth and I had conducted an interview a bit back for the Conversations with Passion radio show, where we talked about two of the strategies I was planning to cover today anyway. So we actually have Elizabeth here via an interview that I had done recently and conducted recently with Elizabeth, but we don't have her here live. So I just wanted to let everybody know that right away. She sends her regrets, and also one of the things that she wants to do, that she mentioned to me early on, was provide everybody with a copy of her ebook, a free copy of her ebook. So if you want to take advantage of that, just let me know after the webinar. You can reach me at thatspeakerguy@gmail.com. Again, thatspeakerguy@gmail.com, and we'll be able to get that out to you. I also wanted to let people know that if you want to share this webinar after the fact, we're definitely going to have a replay as well, because I know from a time perspective, it's always a challenge for everybody to make it to to a webinar and to things at a specific time. And we're going to talk about this today, more of a learning on demand world, where we like to be able to jump on and tune in when we can. So that said, I'm really excited, like I say, to deliver and share some of the secrets that it's took me thousands of hours to learn in interviews with everybody from all walks of life that you can imagine. So I'm excited to share that insight with you. And also what I'm going to do, because of the fact that Elizabeth wasn't able to make it. Originally, I was planning to share 3, maybe 4 super achiever secrets. And this time around, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to share 7 super achiever and super achievement traits. Also, at the same time, one of the things that I'm really excited about as well is that at the end, I'm going to allow time for a Q&A if you want to take advantage of that. So, and how we'll do that is through the chat box. So I'll come onto the screen after the formal presentation itself is complete, and then it'll give you a chance to ask any questions that you may have. So without further ado, let's jump right into things. And I want to talk, as I mentioned, about enlightened super achievement. And I'm going to run the interview with Elizabeth almost right away. But just before I get there, I wanted to pose a question to kick things off. And this is a question you may or may not know T. Harv Eker, who's the author of The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And I'm a big fan of T. Harv Eker's work. And you can see the book, of course, right on the screen there. So Harv Eker, we had him on the show. And a while back, i.e. probably about less than a year ago, he said something to me in the interview that I had never heard before. And it changed my perspective and thought process and the way I looked at super achievement and super achievers. And he asked me the question if I was a problem solver or an opportunity seeker. So this is in relation to how you work with customers, how you help customers whenever they might be looking for something that you might be able to offer. And I actually thought at the time that opportunity seekers and problem solvers were exactly the same thing. Turns out that's not the case. So the difference being, I sold, a lot of people, listening right now know I sold photocopiers for a living, not for the faint of heart, for a number of years. And in that world, an opportunity would be looking at say a yellow photocopier. And so I thought that's what you should look for, a yellow photocopier, or if you have a car that's, blowing blue smoke out the back, that's what you should be looking for. That's an opportunity because that car obviously needs some work done. But when I talked to Harv about this, he changed my perspective in the sense that, looking for a problem and helping people get rid of their problems is way more powerful than trying to find an opportunity to, turn something into a sale, or to make them think that they should replace something or buy with you. So, the difference is, it sounds small, but it's very, it's very massive, because being a problem solver, you're helping them make their pain go away. So let's say they have a pain that's keeping them up at night, something that, that won't let them go to sleep. Well, if you can help them solve that problem, if they, for example, if they're looking to buy a house and they want to be closer to the school where their kids, where they want to send their kids, you're helping them remove a pain that keeps them up at night. Actually, a good friend of mine has a son who was recently diagnosed as autistic, and he wanted to be close to a school that specialized in autism, and he was willing to take a major loss on the price of selling his home and pay a little bit more on the home he bought, simply because he wanted that pain to go away, the pain of not being close enough to the school. So, if you're a realtor and you can help that customer, find that pain and actually get rid of that pain, you're going to have a lot more happy customers than the person that's simply saying, you should buy a new house because your other house, looks a little bit old. Likewise, I mentioned the car, the blue smoke coming out the back. Same idea. There's a reason probably why that person doesn't want to replace that car. That's maybe rusting or has the blue smoke coming out of the back. Maybe they can't afford it. Maybe they're just not ready. Maybe it's working well, so they don't see the need. And much like the copier, since I started with that, those customers may not be in the market for a new copier, but I saw a yellow copier and thought it was an opportunity. So this sounds like a small thing, but how does it relate to this world of enlightened super achievers and super achievement? It's because enlightened super achievers are problem solvers, not opportunity seekers. So before I even jump into some common traits of super achievement, whether it's from a customer point of view, whether it's just from a relationship point of view, if you can help people, help get rid of their problems and make their pains go away, you are going to be somebody that's way more valued than somebody that's just looking for an opportunity to sell or an opportunity to see what's in it for them. So as we jump into this thing, and this really talks to what I think an enlightened super achiever is. So as I jump into things, I just want to put that out there and get you to ask yourself, am I helping solve problems or am I trying to find opportunities? Because again, the difference is massive. And so when I talk enlightened super achievement, what do I mean? Well, enlightened super achievers to me are the people that not only try to achieve at the highest level, regardless of the cost of somebody else, they're the people that instead, whenever they reach the top, which they do as super achievers, they actually are enlightened and they try to bring other people along with them and find ways to serve other people as well during their process of making their way to the top. So that's what an enlightened super achiever is, because Elizabeth and I had a great conversation about this, and I wouldn't want somebody to think I'm referring to that super achiever or high achiever that reaches the top by stepping on somebody else, because that's absolutely not what I'm talking about today. What I want you to do is to become an enlightened super achiever, again, who helps other people along the way and gives back rather than trying to simply take. So now that we know that that's the definition of an enlightened super achiever rather than simply a high achiever, I mentioned that I was going to air an interview that we had done with Elizabeth, where we cover off, Elizabeth and I, during our conversation, we talk about the $1 Million Hearts project that her and I have been working on, which is a way to talk about people who are giving back and who do have $1 Million Hearts. And that's the number 7 trait that I wanted to share, is these enlightened super achievers are constantly finding ways to serve and give back. And so if you want to become an enlightened super achiever, there's no better way than to find a way to serve. And at the same time, I also wanted to mention as well that in the same interview, we'll talk about facing fears. So, we have a great conversation about her interview with Jack Canfield, which, I think it's great because it talks about, it's not always easy to interview somebody or to, to tackle interviewing somebody for the first time that you don't know or who might have a, a big name in the field. But, in the conversation, we talk about the fact that she is taking action on it anyway, and that interview's already happened. So she talks the power of taking action. So the first 2 traits, one is, talking about the idea of giving back. And the second one, like I mentioned, is the idea of conquering a fear. And the giving back one, in fact, I talked to somebody this past weekend, somebody that I'm really close with, who shared the meaning of altruistic, which I don't think I really knew the actual meaning, or at least properly knew the meaning. And so what the definition is, I guess, is unselfish concern for the welfare of others. And this is something I think enlightened super achievers do extremely well. So I feel that it was important to share this interview where Elizabeth and I talk about both of these things and both of these traits. So I'm going to now air the interview with Elizabeth. You'll see me minimizing my screen for a sec just so I can play the audio, and I'm going to leave put her slide back up with her picture on it, so you'll know who's talking. And yeah, check this out. Take a peek. It's about 9 minutes, and then I'll jump back in and I will run through the other top 5 traits.
So I think that might be a great segue to the new project, because that's kind of like on the heartstrings, to join the family. I guess, can you share with us a little about the $1 Million Hearts project and what it meant to you, and how it's evolved and what you saw in it first? I mean, it's a whole lot of questions to ask, but I'd just love to get your feeling and thoughts on why this project and how it kind of came together.
I think I honestly, I'm going to point that back to you, because one of the things that I noticed when I met you and had you on my show was that you have this open heart, and you're willing to be vulnerable and willing to try new things, and very very driven, and you got it. And I felt like when I met you, I told you that I'm like, I barely have to tell you what this is that I'm trying to do, and you instantly got it. And it was this website I had. I have a lot of websites registered, and it was called milliondollarhearts.org. And it originally started doing things for heart and stroke awareness, because my father's a stroke survivor. And it wasn't really catching on very well. And you and I have reworked it, so to speak, I think, into this fabulous website to celebrate people and organizations that make a difference. And you wrote part of this in their community and the world at large. And we've got some really neat interviews up here. It's milliondollarhearts.org. And I'm super proud to be doing this with you. It's so much fun.
But whenever I was watching Tom speak and share stories, right away I was thinking about our project and thinking, there's so many things that they did that really fit in well with having $1 Million Heart. I mean, I would say he's a perfect candidate for $1 Million Heart. And so one of the things Tom talked about what he did, which I thought was so funny and cool, is that he said how his father used to always go and shake a person's hand if they were wearing a uniform. He wants to thank them for their service, and he would do it at the cost of possibly being late for his flight. Like, he just couldn't pass the person in the uniform without going up and saying thank you for your service and everything you sacrificed for us. And after September 11th, this is where it gets interesting, he still couldn't stop doing it. But the problem then was there were a lot more people wearing uniforms, and he was doing it at airports, and he would shake, if there were a line of 12 people, he would shake each hand. But the problem was that they were taught after September 11th that you need to watch for somebody who's trying to distract you. So the other person with them, if they want to try to pull something off, that would be the way they would do it. So Tom said that I have to admit that my father was pulled inside for the checkup more times than I can count. And he said there were many a time we barely made our flight. And he said, even still, knowing that there was a chance he was going to be pulled aside and checked and that we were maybe going to miss our flight, he absolutely refused to stop doing it. And I thought that was such a touching story.
Yeah, and those are the kind of stories that are so meaningful to people all around the globe. You hear that, and it teaches you something that maybe we all should stop and maybe do that and be late for our flight or whatever. But those are messages to teach children and others. And I think that's kind of the heart of this whole website. Really, is there are a lot of people in the world, and we're going through and featuring people. All sorts of different people here. We've got Maggie Thorne, who's collecting shoes for people in other countries. The Fonz is on here even. So I welcome, and you travel around and you meet people. So I love that about you, and I love that you are able to really tell their stories in so many different ways. And so I'm thankful for you to be on this website with me. I really appreciate it. It's fun. I don't even know if we know what we're going to do yet, but it's a start.
Absolutely, and that goes back to the point about taking action, right? It all starts somewhere, but if you don't take action, it doesn't start at all. And there's a great quote by Les Brown, and I'm paraphrasing it best, but it's along the lines of, you don't have to be great to get started, but you sure have to get started if you ever want to become great. And I think that really speaks for it. And I'll also say that if I look at kind of the bigger picture for the site, I think it's cool that we can feature people that may not be a known household name, along with people that might be a household name, and demonstrate that you can have $1 million heart no matter what walk of life you come from. And you, I believe, Elizabeth, and I hope I'm not wrong in saying this, because I'm not sure if it maybe already happened, but I believe you have Jack Canfield coming up, or you just had Jack on the show?
Yeah, on Thursday on the Best Ever You show, we've got him at 1 o'clock Eastern time, which is really exciting. Really exciting. You know him already, so talk to me.
well, all I was going to say is that once you're done the interview, maybe we'll I was going to say maybe we'll fight over who should put up, Jack and share message about his $1 million heart.
No, we'll not fight. We agreed we were.
Yeah, absolutely. But I was going to take it one step further. Well, yeah, you can have $1 million heart and then fight about who you're putting up on the site. But I'll take it one step further because, yes, we brought Jack on the show last year. And now you'll have Jack on the show, and maybe there's a way we can kind of merge and have two stories for the first time. Have two stories about Jack. What you took from the interview, and maybe a message he shared, and what I took from my experience with Jack. And I mean, you don't have to look far to start seeing how big his heart is when you start realizing that they donate a percentage of every single book they sell. Him and Mark Victor Hansen with the Chicken Soup series, and then Jack on his own with his book, donate a percentage of every book that he's ever sold to charity. And when you start realizing the Chicken Soup of the Soul series has sold over 500 million copies, you start to realize how much, I guess these two, meaning him and Mark, in fairness, they both did this together, how much money they've contributed to trying to create a better world. I mean, just that one little thing alone, because, out of hundreds of things that Jack's done over the years with $1 million heart, qualifies, I think, him first.
Yeah, it almost feels like you need a whole day to interview somebody like that, and I've got an hour, and I'm wondering if I'm going to sleep tomorrow or I don't quite even know the words for it, but you get all worried and then you go, wow, they're really neat and mellow. Why should I get all worried about that? They talk nicer and in a more professional, well-rounded way, and I don't know. You can tell I'm kind of getting nervous already, and it's Tuesday, and so I've got 2 days to sit and worry. And I don't think he would like that. Honestly.
Well, what I'll tell you from my experiences, the second part you said there in terms of, and then they become, and you realize how down to earth they are and how easy they are talking. Well, Jack is that guy. I mean, he makes you feel a comfort at the second that you hear his voice. And so, I had been nervous too, because I've been a big fan of Jack for a long time, and it's kind of one of those big moments. But I have to say, he put me at ease within seconds. So I feel it's going to be the exact same for you. And he's so, and I mean this in a very positive way, so polished in the sense that he's done so many interviews over the years that he's just such a class act, but also he's so polished that, sometimes you do interviews and you feel like you're pulling something out of a person. You don't feel that way at all with him. So I think you're in for a real treat, and the insight that he'll share is astounding. I still sometimes boggles my mind when I think about just that, like you said, the amount of time you have, just that 1 hour of insight from Jack would equate to, maybe what would take a book to fill. It's amazing.
I always wonder when you interview people of that, the word, he's sold so many books and so forth. I wonder if they think that you have everything about them memorized, and I never really do that because I like to really discover people. Like I've never met him, so I'd ask the same questions on the radio that I would ask him in person if I had an hour with him in person. Like, who are you? What are you all about? Without having listened to all the other interviews. And I don't know. I kind of take it more from a I've never met you stance. Tell me about you, because I think a lot. Not everybody knows him. Not everybody's listened to. Not everybody knows him, and I think a lot of times people listen, and they may not have heard him in an interview. They may have read his book, but not heard an interview for an hour.
Well, everybody, there you have it. There's my conversation with Elizabeth, and like I mentioned, I think it just speaks for the power of giving back and facing fears. She went ahead with the interview with Jack. either way. And I have to say that this is, again, a common trait I've discovered with Enlightened Super Achievers. One thing, I've been getting some messages, some emails I noticed, and even a text letting me know that people are having trouble logging into the chat box. So that actually quite a few people were telling me they're having trouble logging into the chat box. So what I'll put out there is that if you want to ask a question, I've had a couple already. If you want to ask a question for the end, feel free to, if you can log into the chat box, great. But if you can't, feel free to send me a Facebook message or an email message, and I'll do my best to answer at the end of the webinar itself. That's one of the great things about technology. You never know what it's going to present. So again, I've talked to a lot of people that said they're having trouble logging into the chat box itself. Haven't run into that before, but rather than try to troubleshoot that now, I want to keep on rolling. As I mentioned, there will be a replay as well, so people will be able to see it either way. And of course, nobody's saying they can't see it. It's just a matter of they can't actually type into the chat box and log online that way. So we'll continue on. So common trait number 5 is what I call the mentorship plan. So again, the mentorship plan. You'll see a guy on the screen that you may recognize, Robin Sharma from The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And why I put Robin on the screen is because Robin talks regularly about the power of mentors. He has 2 books called The Greatness Guides, which talk to this, I believe, and feel. And the other reason I put Robin up there is much like Arlene Dickinson on this second slide. Arlene and Robin have become, I'm going to say, almost mentors from afar to me. I've been, I guess, sort of, it's humbling, and I've been blessed to be able to sit with some of these, some of the greatest minds, I guess, in the thought leadership world. And in essence, they've sort of become my mentors. But one of the things, talking about this as a trait, one of the things I noticed that Enlightened Super Achievers do extremely well is they have mentors and they actually have proteges. So what I'm going to suggest is if you want to become an Enlightened Super Achiever, there's no better way than to learn from other Enlightened Super Achievers and, find a way to make them your mentors. The great thing about this is you don't have to sit down with this mentor or sit across the table from them. It can be just a matter of you grabbing a great book by this mentor, or it can be a matter of you finding a way to reach out to them, and have a conversation regularly. But at the same time, it also could be watching a video by this person that you're a fan of. It could be finding a way to reach out and talk to this person that you're a fan of. So you can find lots of ways to find mentors. And also, if you are that person that is the mentor, Enlightened Super Achievers find a way to reach out and give back to proteges. So yeah, and so mentors is something that's a big thing in the world of Enlightened Super Achievement. And as we've interviewed a lot of Super Achievers, they've talked often about mentors being a big part of why they rose to the top. And mentors, one of the things that I feel that they know really well is that nobody, and that is nobody, really truly does it alone. So whether you give back and become a mentor to somebody else and help pull them up, or whether you're looking for that mentor that can help you pull you up, I believe the process of mentoring is something you really should dive into if you want to become an Enlightened Super Achiever. And I should mention, so some strategies for for mentorship is list the people that you would want to learn from and find their books, find their audio programs. Listen to somebody like Tony Robbins on audio CD, and he can become your mentor. Or find people in your immediate circle or your community who you admire, and find a way to make them your mentor. So either strategy, you can pick up the phone and reach out to somebody who you want to emulate and want to learn from, or you can find a way to actually go and get whether it's a CD, a book, an audio program, any of those things on a person that you want to learn from. And either way, you can actually use the strategy to make them your mentors. Continuing on the mentor theme, another thing that's really powerful is finding a mastermind and building a mastermind. And this really is just a group of like-minded people that work toward a common goal. So this can be, there's people that are using masterminds in various walks of life, whether it's people that are trying to get through, certain tragedies or things in their lives, and they want to, sit together and learn from each other and support each other. Whether it's, the people on the screen you can see, those are some of the comics that I shared the bill with years ago, and they became mentors to me, all 3 of the ones on the screen and many more. took me under their wing, became mentors, and we became a mastermind together because we all learned from each other. You'll see the manhole at the top of the screen, and that's because I've always said that if I've fallen down a manhole and I can show you where to jump, so you don't have to fall down the same manhole as me, wouldn't you want to jump over it? Because you'll probably fall down many of your own. Just like the masterminds that I partnered with, they've actually helped me avoid certain manholes as well. So the power of masterminding is huge. And how do you actually get a mastermind together or become part of a mastermind? Well, first of all, you can look out there and see if there's other masterminds, i.e. groups that are working together toward a common goal that you can perhaps become a part of. Or the other option is you can actually form your own mastermind. So the big thing here is just to make sure you have the right people in the mastermind, because the wrong people can poison the mastermind. But it's such a powerful thing. It's worth the effort to either form your own mastermind group or join a mastermind group as soon as you can. So again, on that theme of mentorship and the fact that enlightened super achievers have mentors and believe in mentorships, they also believe in masterminds, which is really a bunch of mentors and proteges working together. And again, the strategy you can use to form your own mastermind is to either start one from scratch or to join one that already exists. I'd probably be remiss to not mention tour mentors. We had a gentleman on our radio show and actually in our book series named Richard St. John, who wrote a book called 8 to Be Great. And Richard's done something similar to me. He's interviewed a lot of super achievers and asked them what it takes to be great. And he's actually analyzed what are the key 8 things that bring these people to the top. And so I asked Richard about the importance of mentors, and he said, Corey, mentors came up a lot. So these super achievers talked about having mentors a lot, but he said more than mentors, what came up was tour mentors. So the people that actually told them they couldn't achieve, the people that told them they couldn't make it, these are the people that drove them harder to make it. And these are the people that in some ways actually inspired them and motivated them to go out and do bigger things. So why there's a picture of me on the screen with a guitar in my hand is because I had a tour mentor back in the day, and it wasn't obviously that dramatic, but I had a tour mentor when it came to me playing music and singing, and this person in some ways motivated me to go out and pursue my music career and do more with it than I probably ever would otherwise. So I see that tour mentor as somebody who played a big part in me, I guess, becoming the person that I am today. So what this person did was, it was actually an ex-girlfriend who, when I first started playing guitar and singing, I wanted to show her a song, and I played the song for her, and she said, "Please stop playing music, you're hurting my ears." It's always the thing you want to hear from somebody who's valued and important in your life. And so what happened as a result is I asked her the question first and foremost, are you saying I could never play music in public? And she said, if you're telling me you're planning to do that, let me know now so I can move on and we can not embarrass each other. And so I share that because I think sometimes first and foremost, the things that the most embarrassing things that happen to us, I think other people maybe need to hear the most because it humanizes us. But at the same time, it served as a motivator. It served as a big motivator for me to go and do more with music than again I ever probably would have otherwise. And I kept wanting to learn and get better. And I wasn't that good at the guitar that time, and so I really dived in, and I ultimately I ended up doing some stuff with music, putting CDs out and getting on the radio and that kind of stuff that I perhaps dreamed of doing, but never would have maybe otherwise done if I didn't have that major driving force. So this, ex-girlfriend became a real driving force for me. So thank you, ex-girlfriend. But at the same time, I guess that I also had a little bit of validation too, because that same ex-girlfriend asked my mother at one point if I was going to be playing music anywhere in the area and how I get into music and all those kind of good things. So, maybe this person maybe thought otherwise after years of me working my tail off just to get away from being tone deaf, as it were, with music. So, these tour mentors can really push us. So don't overlook the power of having tour mentors in your life. Common trait number 4 is the power of saying no. And this is a hard one. Me, somebody born in Prince Edward Island, meat and potatoes, taught always to say yes to everything. This was hard for me to understand that these enlightened super achievers said no. They found ways to say no often and regularly. And this was, again, a hard thing for me to get my head around. But at the end of the day, it paid dividends when I finally, got it into me, the idea of saying no, to the things that you really shouldn't be spending your time doing, and the people in your life that are maybe adding negativity and taking away some of the positivity. So this idea of being able to say no, it's a powerful thing. It's not always easy to do, but what I've discovered is these super achievers find ways to do it, whether it's saying no again to people in your life that are taking you down, or whether it's saying no to those things that maybe you just can't take on and they aren't getting you closer to your goal. So you'll see I have Jerry D, the comedian, on the bottom of the screen. And the reason I have Jerry D down there is when we had Jerry on the show, we talked about this power of saying no, and I asked him how he juggled so many things, because I get this question all the time. How do you juggle so many things? A good friend of mine, Kathy Duguay, asked me, how do you, can you, you should share sometime in a book, the power of getting crap, I'll use the nice word, done in a short amount of time. And so I asked Jerry D, how do you juggle so much stuff, in the little amount of time we have? And he told me the story about going out on Halloween. His daughter went out on Halloween, rather, and he went and performed a show on Halloween, and he didn't get to go see his daughter's second Halloween. And he didn't get to see her dress up. And when she came home, she told him all about her Halloween, and he realized missing that Halloween wasn't as important. It was more important, missing that Halloween was crucial to him. And, going to that gig and performing that gig wasn't as important as what would have been traveling around with his daughter on Halloween when she was 2 years old and experiencing that Halloween with her. So he made the decision at that point to start saying no to the gigs and things that would interfere with the special moments that he didn't want to miss. So, that's an example of the power of saying no. And I'm going to talk about it in a second when I talk strategy for how to decide what to say no to. But what the takeaway from there is that when you find big enough yeses, you're going to have to start saying no to other things. So these enlightened super achievers know how to say no. So what's, maybe a strategy for deciding what to say no to and even how to say no? So let's talk about what to say no to first. Well, what I always tell people when it comes to this is you need to get really clear on what your goals are and what your mission statement is, whether in personal life or professional life. And you need to write down what that mission statement is. And when you know and you're crystal clear on what that mission statement is, it gets a heck of a lot easier to start saying no. So as an example, I share this often. My mission statement is simply that I want to be the person who donates, motivates, inspires, entertains, and educates. And so for me, a no is something that doesn't help me do any of those things. Now, I'll add in the caveat, obviously, there's another element too. If it's spending time with a person that I want to spend time with, it might not be achieving one of those 5 things, but that's on my personal life, and I'll make the decision still that, this person's adding value to my life. I want to be around this person. So that's a yes for me. That's a big yes. So again, having this mission statement is, an easier way to say no, because it allows you to define, what the things are that you want to do in your life. And if if somebody asks you to do something and take on a project and it hits 5 of those areas, let's say, and you have 5 like mine, then that's an easy yes. If it hits 0, it's probably an easy no. And if it hits, 1 or 2, it's still probably a pretty easy no. So it makes it easier to decide what to say yes and no to. So I wanted to add in what Disney's common purpose is, because it explains why they would say no, for example, to taking on a project that may not serve them well or may not flow with what their common purpose as an organization is. So Disney, years ago, their common purpose when Walt Disney was still alive is he basically said, our common purpose and our goal is to make people, especially children, happy. What I find interesting is all these years later, Disney has shortened that to make people happy. So why is this significant? Is because if you know and are crystal clear on what your mission statement or your purpose is, it's a lot easier to say no to things that aren't aligned with your purpose. So in Disney's case, they wouldn't say no to buying some sort of business that went right against the values of making people happy and perhaps even serving families. So again, if you want to know what to say no to, determine what you should be saying yes to and what your purpose is, and then the no's become a lot easier. And how do you say no? Well, I'll give you a little strategy that Chalene Johnson uses. Chalene is the creator of TurboJam. And what she does is she actually, when somebody asks her to take something on, she asks them for some time to think about it because she wants to make sure if she can take it on or not. And then that way she can decide if it really is a yes or no. But then if it is a no, she can come back and let them know she took some time to think about it. And even though it's not a fit for her, she can suggest some people that might be able to help them out. And the great part about that is nobody feels offended because you're taking the time to consider it and you're taking the time to explain why it's not something you can take on right now. So let's jump into the next common trait. This is one of the most exciting areas for me, and it relates to what we're doing today, which is learning. So the common trait that I've discovered, another common trait of Enlightened Superachievers, is the learning plan. So that's what the TLP stands for. They have a learning plan. You know, they spend time learning. What we've learned is lifelong learners are leaders. And you notice I didn't say readers are leaders. It's because you can be a reader and not read the right stuff. Or, you know, you may be a reader and you might not be actually spending a lot of time reading. Or you know, you may decide to learn in a different way than reading. So it doesn't have to be, you know, that readers are leaders. It can actually be learning, however you're feeding your mind, whatever way to choose to do that. And I'm going to talk in a minute about the fact that we've never been in a better time if you want to be a learner and you're not a reader. But you'll see on the screen there is a guy that I was a big fan of, Zig Ziglar, the late, great Zig Ziglar. You probably know Zig, if nothing else, from all of his quotes over the years, and especially now in recent years on their Facebook page with millions of followers. But we asked him the question because Zig Ziglar is, you know, one of those people, or was one of those people that was heavily involved in the learning and development field. So we asked Mr. Ziglar how he decided what he was going to spend his time learning if he wanted to grow and feed his mind. And he told us in a nutshell, you know, he was, I think, 83 or 82 at the time. And he said, you know, in terms of the amount of time I have to now keep reading and diving into different materials and feeding my mind, I want to make sure I'm reading something that grows my mind. And so I read things that are true, personal and professional development related, and or biographies. And I think that's a powerful message about, you know, what are the things that can feed and grow our mind. So little quick story about me and learning. You know, a lot of people I know know that this is my game changer book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is the Dale Carnegie's great book written in the 1930s. Still selling 1 million copies a year. And it was the first book I ever read at 27 years of age. Hadn't read a book up until that point. And it changed everything for me because I read that book. I went on a retreat and my mother bought the book for me for a quarter. And that book changed my life. So that quote that says, price is what you pay, value is what you get, is definitely true with this book. And so this book changed the rules for me and changed the game. So this How to Win Friends and Influence People, I read it once. I was pulled into the storytelling style of Dale Carnegie. And then I jumped back in a second time. So it is actually technically the first and second book I ever read in my life. So it was how I get started with learning. And from that point forward, I read 3 to 5 books a month now, and I was hooked. Now, here's the cool thing. Here's the statistics. You may or may not know this, but they did a study, and the top 2% of North American CEOs, the one thing they have in common is they read an average of 1 to 3 books a month, the type of books we were talking about. They read 1 to 3 books a month. And here's the more interesting part to me. The average North American reads less than, and you're hearing this right, less than a half a chapter a year. So yes, you heard that right. The average North American CEO, the top 2%, I should say, rather, read 1 to 3 books a month, if not more, and the right kind of books, whereas the average North American reads less than a half a chapter a year. There's a big message there about the power of learning and the fact that lifelong learners are leaders. So how do you get your read on? Well, we interviewed this lady, Susan Mannion McDonald, and Susan's story, I'll just tell you a really quick glimpse of it. But Susan, 12 roughly years ago, was diagnosed with 4th stage cancer. And so the doctors told her, when she asked for options and solutions, the doctors told her she only had 2 months to live. And so what Susan did from that point is she dived into everything she could learn about turning her body into an alkaline state. And she was able to figure out ways to essentially help take the toxins out of her body. So she actually detailed this in a book that she wrote, a best-selling book called Balance. And so what I was interested in when I was talking to Susan is, how did you decide what to read if you only had 2 months to learn? And she said, Corey, what I did is I actually just looked and said, what are the top 3 books that the people that I want to learn from and I admire and know the most about turning your body into an alkaline state? What are the top 3 things that they're reading? And she said the books that kept getting mentioned over and over again, at least 3 times, that was what she dove into first. So she actually went and said, what are the things that could change lives because they've already changed lives based on what the people she admired were reading? And then she picked those books first. So if you want to become an enlightened superachiever, how can you learn from what Susan did? You can actually ask the people that you admire, that you want to learn from, that inspire you, what are they reading? and then pick up those books and dive in yourself. So, think about those mentors I mentioned earlier. Find out what those mentors are reading and read likewise. If you're in a mastermind group or a support group, find out what they're reading and what has impacted their life and read likewise. So what a great strategy. Just reach out and ask people what they're reading. So I mentioned if you're not a reader, here's the great news. He says as he looks at the Success Magazine image at the bottom of the screen. So you might be thinking, well, isn't that reading, Corey? That's a print magazine. But I'll explain. So Success Magazine actually comes with an audio CD inside, and you can listen to that audio CD in your car. It has some of the greatest thought leaders in the world being interviewed, and you can actually dive into that CD for about $3.99 an issue of the magazine. So you buy the magazine, and inside there's a CD you can pull out and pop into your car. So the point is that even if you're not a reader, we're in a learning on demand world and generation today. So, we're in a what I call an information heavy, knowledge light generation. We're getting hit with so much information. We're bombarded. Think about your Facebook newsfeed. Think about the different ways that information comes into you via email. We're bombarded with information, but it's harder and harder to sift through and find the wisdom and the knowledge. So that being the case, what a great time to be able to learn on demand. What a great time in history where you don't have to be a reader to learn. And so you'll see on the screen, I have the on-air note. That's to say that now you can listen to podcasts on your perfect chosen subject. You can listen to an audio CD, like I mentioned. You can actually get the books on audio CD. There's a great website called Audible, owned by Amazon, that you can actually dive into and learn, grab almost any book you can think of and listen to it as you drive around. You can actually watch TED Talks. You'll see I have a gentleman sitting on a desk on the other side of the screen, and that is Richard St. John. So Richard St. John, who I mentioned earlier with the book 8 to Be Great, also has a TED Talk of the same name, which has been viewed millions of times. Well, you can go in and learn from Richard's talk. Actually, in fact, Richard's talk is, I believe, less than 4 minutes. And you'll learn what are the 8 traits that it takes to be great in less than 4 minutes. So what a great time in history to be able to learn whenever you can kind of learn from whatever source you want. And the learning on demand part, I mentioned getting to the wisdom. Well, once you pick your resources, be it a person that you admire like a Tony Robbins or a Zig Ziglar, be it a friend that you admire that's maybe putting some stuff out, or even just maybe somebody who's sharing quotes on Facebook that's a friend, or sending an email out with great insight, or sharing inspiration that they think might help somebody else. Once a week they're sharing something, let's say via email. You even if it's that, you actually have opportunities to say, okay, this is my source. And then once you know what your source is, you just keep going back to that source over and over again. And you're going to make sure you get past all that information and stuff that you don't need to get to the wisdom you really do need. And that's what enlightened super achievers do well. So what's a lesson you can learn from Jack Canfield, who we've had on the show and asked him about this, or Brian Tracy, who hopefully we'll have on the show fairly soon. And I think I actually put an E in Brian Tracy's last name, so I don't think that's supposed to be there, so I apologize in advance, Brian. And maybe we'll edit the slide, and then I'll edit my words after that. But Brian Tracy came up with the idea of having a mobile library. So this is the idea: if you're traveling around X amount of hours a week or a year or a month, why not listen to some audio programs that are going to feed your brain and enhance your life? Think of the amount of time in a year. I mean, you can go to a Street Smart or School of Knox University, essentially by turning your car into an audio and mobile library. So think about that as you're driving around. What could you be listening to in your car to feed your mind and brain? Jack Canfield talks about, and I'm not going to go too far into this because I do share this often, but Jack Canfield talks about his hour of power. And rather than me go into the hour of power, let me just say that in his hour, he spends 20 minutes learning every day, whether that's reading or finding different ways to feed his brain. So if you want a learning strategy, follow what Jack's doing and find a way 20 minutes every day to feed your brain and mind. And what Jack does is he does it at the first of the day. So even if you don't want to dedicate an hour to, developing your life, an hour of power, maybe you spend 20 minutes a day rather, reading or learning or feeding your brain. So, maybe just make that 20 minutes and decide in advance what you're going to read, what you're going to feed into your mind. And once again, you can have a mobile library on the road. And before you get into all the technology that's going to take your attention away during the day, maybe open up or crack open a book and feed your mind that way as well. But again, this is what the enlightened super achievers do. They know that lifelong learners are leaders, so they continually find ways to feed their brain and mind. Now it's time for common trait number 2. And common trait number 2 is the attitude. This is such a powerful thing, the attitude and the mindset. that you have and carry with you every day. So you'll see, I noted at the bottom here, what is the real cost of, gas when it relates to time and energy? What am I meaning there? Well, what I notice is so many people get fixed on the price of gas. The price of gas, well, right now, especially, in Alberta, the price of gas and oil. But people get so fixed all year round on the price of gas, whether it's going up or down at the tank. And what I would pose to you is that mentality and the thinking of, the price of gas is going up, I better rush to the gas station to save, $3 on a tank of gas. That mindset that you're having and carrying to, and bringing with you every time you rush into the gas station, I feel personally is costing you more in mental energy than you'll ever save in gas. But not to add the fact that sometimes you're spending as much gas. I know people that spend $2 to get to a gas station across town to save $1. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, I'm sorry to say. But there's a bigger cost. What is your mental state when you're focusing on the price of gas and rushing into the gas station, based on the price of gas? There's also, the time you're putting into the time you're losing when you rush into the gas station. So I just want to share that Enlightened Super Achievers don't spend a lot of time worrying about things like the price of gas. And if you're spending your time thinking about that, maybe it's time to, reanalyze that and ask yourself, am I really saving anything, or am I costing myself more in mental anguish and maybe even in dollars and cents as well? So here's a great strategy I believe you can apply. Not my strategy, and in fact, I heard it from Jack Canfield, but Jack has mentioned, I believe it's not his either. I think it's a strategy that's been used for a lot of years, but I'd like to share it with you because I think it's something you can apply in your personal life starting tomorrow. And that is E plus R equals O is the equation and formula. And what it stands for is E is the event, R is your reaction or response to the event, and O is the outcome. So the event is something you can't control. Somebody yells at you or gets mad at you for no reason at all. Somebody cuts you off in traffic and maybe pops you the middle finger. Maybe your car breaks down and you can't control that event, but you're stuck on the side of the road. So the event you can't control, but what you can control is your reaction to the event. So that somebody that cuts you off in traffic, maybe you can choose to feel that maybe, just maybe, something really bad happened in that person's life earlier and they're now taking it out on you. So, maybe you kind of brush it off, and at the same time, you don't carry it with you back to the office. Because what I've discovered is when people react in a negative way to events that they're hit with, they carry that with them many times. They take that with them wherever they go. So, if you can find a positive way to react to events and think about the event before you react, this is what's occurred, and think about your reaction. My experience is you can actually control your outcome. But if you simply react without thinking, you're not going to get the outcome you want. You're going to get the outcome that occurs naturally. So this is a powerful strategy. When you get hit with an event, and you can insert any event here, somebody that you're dating, the relationship ends. Like I say, your car breaks down. Whatever the event is, you do get an opportunity to choose your reaction. It's probably the only choice you do get. And if you're willing to take a chance to think about your reaction and decide what outcome you really want to have, this could be a life changer. So I hope you'll find ways to practice the strategy. Think about this later on. What events do I get hit with daily? What events do I jump on right away and sort of attack right away and react negatively to? And could I be reacting positively to them? So the number one most common trait, we get down to the core of things. The number one most common trait that I've discovered, and I'll share it with a story here. We had Trish Stratus, who you see on the screen, and maybe you know Trish Stratus. Trish was in the wrestling world. So if you've ever heard of the world of professional wrestling, i.e. the world of the Hulk Hogan's, the Rocks, the Stone Cold Steve Austins, well, Trish is noted as the most successful female wrestler in history, but let's just say very close to the most successful, if not the most successful. But she's been regarded as the most successful based on, many things, based on viewers, buy rates, the titles that she's held as a female champion. And so Trish is filled with passion. When you talk to Trish, she is on fire. She's ready to rock this world. So I thought, well, if Trish has that much passion, let's ask her, what is the common ingredient in The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and Hulk Hogan? Because Trish has had the opportunity to sit with all three of those superstars in the wrestling world and pick their brains and talk to them. So she has a good insight as to what do these people do really well. What are the three of them doing so well that they can stay at the top of a field that less than 1% ever get to, and even higher together, combined than probably most of the rest of the industry itself. So, what are they doing to, rise to that top level and to be at the level where people are paying a lot of money to go watch these people, put on a show at a wrestling event? And so Trish said, without hesitation, Corey, the number one most common trait I discovered and saw with Stone Cold, The Rock, and Hulk Hogan is the level of passion they carry into their lives and into the wrestling ring and into the wrestling world. So she said, yeah, most of the people have to be passionate to be in that business. I mean, these people are on the road 300 some days a year. They're sleeping on the floor in hotel rooms when they start. They're not making a whole lot of money. They have to spend a whole lot of money on the road, being on the road. They're away from their family. So like she said, I mean, you have to really have a passion to jump into that. But the key thing to mention here is why, Hulk, Hogan's, Stone Cold, and The Rock, why are they at the top of that field and stayed at the top of that field for so long? And what she said is the level of passion they have. Even though the rest all have passion, they have passion, squared. They have passion to, passion at the highest level. And that's what she noticed was the common trait of those three. So what is the most common trait I've noticed with Enlightened Super Achievers? Over 95% of them are following their purpose and passion in life. What can you take from that? You need to spend the time to find your passion and purpose. It won't always be easy. How did I find my passion and purpose? Well, it started with me performing stand-up comedy. I jumped onto a Yuck Yuck stage. A lot of people know the story. And I told 2 jokes without the mic turned on, my very first night ever. And my jokes fell in deaf ears. I was covered in perspiration, AKA sweat. I didn't deliver. And to be honest, I bombed for a lot of shows after that as well. But the stand-up comedy, by stepping inside my comfort zone and trying it led to my passion that I'm, with today, which is the speaking world, what I do today. That started from me taking that chance and finding stand-up. But it wasn't easy to bomb hundreds of nights in a row and, only get glimpses of hope when it comes to delivering laughs. It wasn't easy. But finding your passion may not be easy, but it's worth the rewards. So again, I've noticed these Enlightened Super Achievers, whatever it took, they stepped out their comfort zone in a big enough way to find their passions. So if you want to know how to join those ranks, then you have to step outside your comfort zone to find your passions. So I said it wasn't easy for me. It hasn't been easier for a lot of the people we've interviewed as well. Mark Goffney, who's on the screen there, was born without arms. And we've had Mark on the show a couple of times. Mark actually lives in San Diego, and I'm going to perhaps do a live video interview with Mark at the end of this month when I travel to San Diego and check out one of Mark's shows while I'm there. And, Mark has a band called Big Toe Rocks. He's performed on stages across the world. He's opened for big bands. He's actually performed stand-up comedy. He has, a commercial he was in was nominated for an Emmy. Mark's achieved a lot of stuff at the highest super achiever level, despite having what we might call many disadvantages. Now, I know Mark doesn't view them as disadvantages, and in fact, his attitude of gratitude actually views them as advantages. But what my point is that I'm sure that Mark didn't have it easy, being born without arms, and touring and traveling on the road, and even just growing up, his parents, and Mark said this was one of the best things they ever did for him. They made him do his regular chores. They made him live a normal life. They made him do all the things that other kids had to do. He talked about to me that how his father, he watched him one day at the kitchen window on a Saturday morning. Mark was watching cartoons, and he watched his father, try to use the rake with his feet and rake up some leaves. And he said, he was just wondering what his father was doing. Like the rake was going all over the place, but he was continuing to try to rake up these leaves. So finally he yelled, "Mark, get out here." And Mark got outside, and he saw his father had just a little tiny pile of leaves that he put together with his feet. And he said, Mark, he said, if I can put this together with my feet, and, I don't have the experience you do working with my feet, then why are you not doing your chores on this Saturday morning? And Mark said from that point forward, he was doing his chores every Saturday morning. But the point is, Mark didn't have it easy. That's the message. But he found his passion. And what's the result? He's been able to achieve at the highest level and have that attitude of gratitude that so many people would love to have that are still, that's still eluding them. So again, just the power of finding your passion. It wasn't easy for me to jump on a stand-up stage. It wasn't easy for Mark to, be born without arms and still achieve at the highest level. But at the same time, that's what happens when you find your passion and purpose. So as we wind down, how do you find your passion? I'm going to give you some strategies that, once again, I like to share that it's taken me a lot of years to learn. I'm going to share them pretty quickly, but you can follow up and get more from me. And again, I'll make a couple of minutes available to answer any questions you might have. Feel free at this point. I've noticed that a handful of people have been able to log into the chat box, but I have had some other people send me some questions and messages all along, and I've been trying not to look at my phone while this is all taking place, but when it starts popping up like that, it's hard not to. So I know some people weren't able to log in, but I know other people were, and I know I was able to log in. So if you were able to log into the chat box and you have questions that you want to pose to me, feel free to type them there. Or like I said, I'm going to actually answer the questions that I had on my phone as well. I'll answer a couple of questions. We'll just take maybe 5 minutes to answer some questions. So if you're hearing me and you're on the chat box right now and if you have a question you want me to answer in relation to things I've been covering today or anything else as well, feel free to pose the question. But if not, like I say, I have a couple of questions I can answer to share with you that others have just asked me or asked me over the last hour. So we'll make it happen either way. So finding your passion. How do you find your passion? Well, I'm going to give you some quick strategy. So first and foremost, what I suggest you do is you take the time to write down what are the things that when you do them, time stands still. What are the things that when you do them, you don't notice the clock. Also, what are the things that you would do if money was an issue? If you won the lottery tomorrow, what would you still do? Because I'm almost certain you wouldn't completely retire. You would actually still do some stuff. So what are the things that you would still do if money wasn't an issue? Also, I'll ask, on top of that, what are the things that you did when you were a child, and money wasn't an issue then when you were a child? What are the things that you did that you got excited about, that kind of lit your fire? And if you put all these things on a list, and you have that list of here's the things I would do, whatever they might be, whether it's me playing guitar was one of them, whether it's writing jokes if you want, whether it's writing poetry. What are the things that you did as a child? What are the things you would do if money was an issue, if you won the lottery? And what are the things that you would continue to do in your life regardless of what happened, and you don't watch the clock when you're doing them? What are those things? If you make that list, and then if you take that list and say, what are the priority ones? What are the ones that are the tops to me? What are the biggest, most important ones to me? I want you to mark those in order. So now let's say you have 6 things on your list, go in order of 1 to 6. And then finally, what I want you to do when you have that list put together of what your potential passions are, then what I want you to do, and maybe, by the way, ask other people, what are the things they notice when you do that you come alive? What are the things that they notice when you do? You just get super stoked. You have this fire lit in your belly that nobody can extinguish. So get other people to tell you what could be on your list. And once you have that list and you prioritize them, then what I want you to do is I want you to go one step further, and I want you to draw your name in the middle of a circle. This is going to become your comfort zone. I want you to look at those 6 on the list, if that's the number, and I want you to list the ones that are truly inside your comfort zone. I want you to list those ones there so you can see what's inside your comfort zone. And then I want you to actually list the ones that are outside your comfort zone. So, I talked about stand-up comedy earlier. That's a great example because that's not for everybody. Maybe it's skydiving is your example. So you list the ones that are inside your comfort zone out of those 1 to 6, and you tackle those first because those will be your easiest. And then the ones that are further outside your comfort zone, you make a strategy for how are you going to tackle those? What are the steps you need to tackle those? So if it's stand-up comedy, maybe you need to go talk in front of people somehow. Maybe you need to try Toastmasters. Maybe you need to find a way to, just start talking to 2 or 3 people at once. Maybe in your office, you bring people together in a huddle and you talk to them. Maybe you run, you join a board. You join a board and learn about being a board member, and that might give you the comfort of talking in front of people. Or you enter competitions, speaking competitions. And this is a way, these little steps that you can grow your comfort zone to get closer to the world of comedy if that's your goal. Or if your goal is to play music, maybe it means you actually get somebody, you sign up for lessons. Maybe that's what it is. If you want to skydive, maybe it means you jump from a step that's 2 feet high and then you increase it by 4 feet. Whatever that might be. But now you have your list of passions, you have your comfort zone circle, and you have what's outside your comfort zone. And if you take that list and you take the steps outside your comfort zone, I feel you're going to have a better chance of finding your purpose and passion in a shorter amount of time than the people who spend most of their lives never finding their comfort zone. So now I'm going to roll through a quick summary of what we covered. And once again, if you have a question you want to pose right now on the chat box, feel free to pose it. But for those that couldn't log on to the chat box or log online, I do have a couple of questions. So I don't want to keep us much past the hour. So I'm just going to raise or pose, 1 or 2 of the questions that I got here. I'm sort of looking at them right now, which I shouldn't be. And then if you want to pose a question, I see, Debbie, that you've just joined us as well. So if you have a question, Debbie, feel free to pose that question. So what we covered today is, and I'm going in reverse order now since I covered them in the common trade order, sort of reverse order, so I could get to number 1 last. What we covered today is passion. So these enlightened superachievers, one of the traits they have is passion. Another one is the attitude. They have an attitude of gratitude, and they also have a can-do attitude. They have the learning plan. They've spent time to find ways to feed their mind, and they have strategies for feeding their mind. They understand the power of saying no, even in light of most people wanting to say yes and it being hard to say no. And they have strategy for saying no. They actually have taken the time to find mentors and maybe even find a way to start or join a mastermind group. If you remember, we talked about the power of mastermind groups. They also believe in the importance of giving back and find strategies for giving back. I believe I mentioned in the interview that we aired with me and Elizabeth Hamilton Garino early on about the fact that Jack Canfield and his partner Mark Victor Hansen of Chicken Soup for the Soul donate a percentage of every single book that they sell, and they've sold actually in the neighborhood of 500 million books. So they've definitely contributed and given back in a big way. Facing fears. I mentioned, the idea of facing fears, and even how Elizabeth talked about wouldn't be easy interviewing Jack Canfield. And trust me, when I interviewed Jack, it wasn't easy, but the power of facing fears cannot be overlooked. So that's what we covered today. We covered a lot of ground. I think you can agree. I hope you'll decide to share the webinar with other people, because we're going to keep the replay running for a little while. And for those people, especially that couldn't make it on to the online side, I'm going to find out if there's a way I can actually set up the chat again and maybe set another time just to, as I'm running the replay, so that they can maybe pose the questions they have, or maybe I'll come back and do a follow-up and answer questions that you may have if you couldn't get on, and mention to me you couldn't get on. So I do apologize once again for that. But what I wanted to end with is to say, if you're going to try to tackle things that are outside your comfort zone, like maybe some of the things here I covered today, maybe you only heard 1 or 2 new things here, that's fine. My whole goal is to maybe share just one thing that makes you think differently about how you approach your life right now. If you heard 1 or 2 things that superachievers are doing that you'd love to start doing, spend 21 days tackling that habit, because it takes 21 days to create a habit. And if you don't spend 21 days trying that strategy you want to put in place, the odds of you achieving it probably pretty minimal. It's no surprise that people say they're going to tackle a New Year's resolution on January 1st. And as we know, upwards of 90% of the people that tackle it never make it past the first 2 weeks. Do you think it's also a coincidence that it takes 3 weeks to create a habit? I personally don't. So it takes 3 weeks to cement something as a habit, but yet most people quit their New Year's resolutions before they've even done them for 3 weeks. Maybe there's a little common trait or common situation going on there. Maybe that's not a coincidence. So that being said, make sure you try whatever you're going to try for 21 days. Maybe you just try one little thing I mentioned today for 21 days and see the difference it can make in your life. One other thing I wanted to mention is I mentioned where Elizabeth Hamilton Garino couldn't join the call today. I mentioned I wasn't sure if she might be able to provide us with an ebook, but I thought afterwards it's probably not fair for me to volunteer that for Elizabeth, because I haven't asked her to confirm that. So what I'll do instead is I'll say that if you want to approach me afterward, where we weren't able to have Elizabeth on today, approach me afterwards, and I'll send you our top 10 insights guide that we, that's based on our discoveries of superachievers. So we did put together a top 10 insights guide. So get in touch with me and I'll provide that to you. And I'll also perhaps do a quick video that I can provide to you as well. So, I want to finish this off by answering a couple of questions that were posed. And right now I'm also going to read something I have here from Debbie Langley. Since everybody can see it, that's why I'm sharing Debbie's name. And then and I'll answer a question or two, and then we'll let everybody run back to their regularly posted schedule. So, well, Debbie just noted that she'll start on the suggestion about the circle and tackling those things that she wants that are outside of her comfort zone. So awesome, Debbie. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, one of the things that one of the questions I got, so since you mentioned comfort zone, Debbie, is I'll share this one. One of the questions I got was the question of how long it'll take to maybe find your passion or step outside your comfort zone. And, I'd love to have an easy, cut and dry answer for this, but the truth is there's no easy, cut and dry answer for this one. The truth is that it could take you months and months and months. It could take you years, or it could take you a week. So, it probably depends as well on what you're trying to tackle. So, for instance, I mentioned that, as far as stepping outside your comfort zone, that, it could be a matter of stand-up comedy. So if it's a matter of stand-up comedy, then of course that's going to take a little bit longer to perhaps jump on the stage, unless you want to throw yourself to the lions like I did when I started and just jump on the stage that night. When you're fooled into jumping onto the stage by the person who brought you into the comedy world. But if that's not the case, it might take you a little longer. if you think stand-up comedy is your passion area than if something like writing a poem is. So, it depends on what that outside your comfort zone situation is. But what I will say is that stepping outside your comfort zone is worth the effort, once again. And, in terms of how long it'll take, it's going to obviously be dictated by yourself, how quick you can tackle the comfort zone, how comfortable you are and secure you are with jumping outside your comfort zone. But it's also going to, factor into how big of an item outside your comfort zone it is. So, I wanted to share that. Since Debbie mentioned comfort zone, I thought, why don't I jump to that question? Another question that I got, just let me grab and check it out here for a second. Okay, so so the question is in relation to, and sorry, I'm looking away from the screen, but I want to make sure I read the question. So the question is in relation to using technology today. So, and I think it's because this person, because I know who they are, they know that I talk about the power of breaking away from technology every now and then. So the question is, how important is it to take breaks from technology and not be so dependent on technology daily? And what I will say is that what we see more often than not are people now that are hooked on their technology and can't break away from their devices for more than minutes at a time. At the very least, they're checking their devices all throughout the day. Now, I'm not judging, I'm just sharing, but when we interviewed Enlightened Superachievers, another common trait was that they go all in with the person they're sitting in front of or standing in front of at the time, so that they can go all in with the device, their own device, later on. So they actually almost like set time blocks where they spend time with their device, and let's say it's 12 o'clock noon for an hour. So that way, when they're standing in front of somebody, they can spend their full time and attention with them. Now, if you're with your friends and your friends are cool with it, then I'm not suggesting you make changes. That's up to you. I'll leave that for you to decide. But if you're with a client, I would say, and my personal opinion, etiquette would suggest that you try to find a way to be all in with the client and then focus on your device later on. So the question was, is this important? I think it's crucially important. How do you do it? Well, I believe that it's like if you want to go on a diet, and I mean, I'm not a big believer in the fan of the word diet, but if you want to go on a lifestyle change, let's say, then don't bring the food into your house. So, if you want to stop eating a certain type of ice cream, don't have that type of ice cream sitting in your fridge because you're going to crave it. So how do you go on it? Let's call it a cell phone diet. At the very least, just turn your phone on silence. You turn your phone on silence when you're in with clients. Don't bring your phone in with you. Turn your ringer off. Or or have it, for like my case, I have it forwarded to the office, so I still get the messages. My clients still get a live voice, but I'm not focused on the device as much. So the answer is, I think it's crucially important. And then I'll go one step further and say, if you want to ever try to break away and take the power back, a great way to do it is to make sure the phone is not tempting you in the first place. We had a doctor on our show not that long ago who shared with us that when you check your device, it releases dopamine and endorphins, so it's a natural high. And where it's a natural high, it's not just a habit, checking your devices. Every time that dings, there's actually an addiction involved where you go, wow, I want that little natural high. I can't blame you for that. I'm just saying that this is what we've discovered. So that being said, if you want to break the habit, then obviously you've got to find ways to sort of take the power back. And my experience is it's out of sight, out of mind is, sometimes the best way to do that. Or another great way is to replace it with a habit that you like a little bit more, or a different habit. So that being said, I'm not suggesting you have to do it. I'm just sharing what we've discovered. So I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So let me just see what else I have on the other one. And we'll make this the very last question. And then I'll let you guys jump back into your regular day because I know we're a little bit over today. So the last question here was, okay, let me read this one. Okay, so it was about the power of giving back. And, why do I think it's so important to give back? And so what I'll say to that is that I believe firmly when it comes to giving back, the reason that the people that seem to be enlightened superachievers give back so often, I don't believe it's a thing where if you give and expect to receive, that it'll come back to you. But what I've noticed is that people that go out of their way to give first and give often without expecting to receive and no hidden agenda are the people that seem to get more back. And so, why is that important, or why do I think that happens? I just think it's, we talk often about the law of attraction, and I know not everybody is a believer or a fan in the law of attraction, but I believe if you walk around with a positive mindset and you walk around with a helpful mind, then help's going to come back your way. I just believe it's a universal thing. I think it's just what happens and what occurs. So I don't know that I can define and explain the exact reason why it happens. But again, I believe that if you, actively tithe, as Mark Victor Hansen would call it, if you find a way to give first, then it's going to come back to you more than once, you know, maybe tenfold. But the key thing to remember there is you can't give expecting to receive. You have to give without expectation. So that is, you know, that's the importance of it. Again, why it happens, I'm, you know, that's beyond me, and that's bigger than me to tell you exactly why it happens. But what I can say is I think it has a lot to do with the fact, you know, the law of, let's say, cause and effect, and the law of attraction, and even the law of taking action in the first place. I think when you put those vibes out there and you put that energy out there and that you put that positivity out there and you give back first, I find that it's going to find its way back to you simply because it's a universal law. So not sure if that was the great answer you were looking for, but who was that? That was R. Hansen. So I'm not sure if R. Hansen, if that was the answer you're looking for, but you know what? It's the answer I wanted to share. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, everybody. Sorry we went a bit over, but I just wanted to give a little bit of extra time to answer some questions where Elizabeth wasn't able to join us today. Once again, if you want to get some more insight from me, if you want to get the guide I mentioned, feel free to send me an email at thatspeakerguy@gmail.com. We will send you some more emails and messages to let you know when we're running another one of these. And once again, thank you so much for finding ways to live with passion every day. And thank you so much for giving me a purpose. Until next time, I'm Corey Poirier. And thank you so much, Debbie Langley, for talking about the power of giving back, you know, giving and not expecting to get back, and sharing that, you know, you find that an awesome touch as well. So thank you, Debbie, and thank you everybody else for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time. I'm Corey Poirier. Peace out.